I'm going to take a few minutes and just explain what a project brief is and how to use this template. So a project brief essentially allows designers to organize their own design sprints and obviously to stay organized. They also allow designers to break down the double diamond design thinking process into an actionable approach and plan. So this is the template. It's meant to be very easy to use. I hope the structure of the document doesn't feel too overwhelming, but essentially you just start by changing the name of the initiative here, update any of the details here at the top with your own information and the status. If there's any parent initiatives, so if this design sprint is part of a larger effort, it would be good to link back there. I'll be going back and forth between this doc and one that's actually filled out just to make it easy. So for example, I'm a task force leader on the transitioning user onboarding for Recruiter under this other project called Alpinist Porter, and I link back to it. So that is one way you can use that. So very simply, you start off by outlining the contents of the document. So for anyone coming for the first time, you'll get a 2 or 3 sentence explanation. This isn't where you overindulge. And just to be clear, this document is not meant to be the artifact that holds where all of your research or all of your designs. This is meant to document the plan and link out to that research and design. So ideally, this document doesn't get too overwhelming, but it's a place to find order and organization. So you start by adding context of the project, defining who the collaborators are, and then there's 3 sections to the document: foundations, approach, and plan. So foundations are like the base information about the project. So you start every project ideally with defining what the problem is. So design is a problem-solving exercise, and so what is that problem? This is where you define it here. It's also important to understand why that problem is important. All right. Any designer that I've met has tons of projects that they could be doing, but they have to prioritize those projects based on how important they are. So this is where it's important. You might be asked by a PM, another stakeholder, or someone in the business, well, why are you doing that now? Why is that important? And you need to give a reason. So, and this is a great opportunity for designers as well to be able to have a strong voice in the design strategy portion of design, right? And that sounds silly, but this is designers need to have strong opinions. And if a project manager comes to you and asks for something, they should be able to articulate why something is important, because we're all accountable. Next, who are users, right? What users are going to be impacted as a result of this problem? So it's good just to write out all those personas here. Maybe it could be by product line, for example, within LinkedIn Recruiter. There's different versions of the product for different user types or different packages that we offer. And I simply listed out all the personas that applied to this that will be impacted or see this initiative. Next, it's great to just ground ourselves with how is this going to impact the business? You might not be asked this by anybody, but it's good to remember that design is a function that either helps an organization make or save money, because an organization that runs out of money goes out of business. So it's good to just remember how do you tie this back to business impact? And then for last step in the foundation section is desired outcome. So it's good to just start by generalizing what we think we're looking for, high level for an outcome of this project. The approach is very specifically meant to help you discover what it is you're designing, but it's good to just know generally okay, I'm probably going to have a set of designs, maybe an email. Not sure what those designs are or what the email looks like, but this will help you get an idea of who you're going to need to include in the approach, even if this is very, very generalized. And it should be. If you already know what you're looking for, why look at all, right? That was Tim Brown. So that is the the foundations section of the doc. Just basically replace everything that is in red. For this section, you could just copy this and paste it and change the text, NPS, and then just add an explanation as to why you think the Net Promoter Score is going to be improved, and therefore helping your company indirectly make money. So that's 2 cents on the business impact section. Now let's jump into approach. So the approach is actually where we define 2 things. What are the principles that are going to guide this project, and then what's the roadmap? So principles are essentially how we're going to guide our product decisions so we don't compromise user needs or product or organizational values, right? So what are the principles that we want in this project? These things also might be a result of the discover phase, specifically explore, right? You might not fully understand the principles, but the way I like to think about principles is that they basically embody the spirit of the solution. We don't know what it's going to be, but ideally, if our solution has these traits, we feel confidently we'll be successful. And that's what will help us avoid compromising user needs or organizational values. So just list out 1 or 2 words, a few words of what the principle is, and just feel free to explain what it is. So for example, maybe one principle is we'd like our solution to be contextual. So users should not feel their workload is interrupted. We should meet them where they are. So that's an example of how to define a principle. And there's a lot of other articles, but I'd highly encourage you to define principles before you jump into the design of the project. Next is the roadmap. So for anyone familiar with the double diamond LinkedIn uses, go to approach. So I'm specifically talking about these beginning sections that most impact the designer workflow. So Discover has a converge and diverge model for both Discover and design. Section 1, as it says here, Section 1 helps us clearly define the problem. So we're going to start every project with a problem, right? You can't not have a problem. But what the Discover phase will help us do is help us understand the problem, right? What are the causes? What are we observing users? What do we know, right? It translates a suspicion into an action. And once we have the problem or the design problem, we can then begin solutioning. So we start converging with tons of ideas, and we converge onto one great idea, and with validation testing and various other methods. So looking at the double diamond process, the project brief helps break that down. So very specifically, we want a set of milestones that will inform on what actions or milestones do we need to do in order to get answers to these questions. So if we start here and discover, what do we need to do to fully understand the problem? So we had defined a problem up here, all right? But how do we validate that that problem is real, right? What are our assumptions? How do we get clarity? I also have more questions here that can help round out this problem. So these questions also come from the design approach. So if you go to Discover, while these questions are broken down by Discover and define, these are the questions that I use to more specifically break down these 2 phases within Discover. So you could just basically dive in. And at any moment, so these questions are really valuable because as a designer, these are the hard questions you're asked. And what's great about a design thinking organization is they will support you in getting answers to these questions. So that's just a very important thing to recognize, is that if your organization is design thinking and design is an important part of the design process and design strategy, they will make time and resource allocations for you to answer these questions. And it depends on the project, how big, how small, how mission essential it is. But if you're asked any of these questions and you can't come up with an answer, you should be able to have a reason for that, or you should have an answer. So it's on the designer to be able to come up with answers to these questions, among others. And so these are meant to guide you through the experience. So for example, one of the questions for Discover, who is the user experiencing this problem? So if you don't know which user, maybe you just assume it's all, but you should ask yourself that question. How does the target user feel about this problem? How do they see it? Right? This could, greatly impact how you approach the solution later on. What is the current behavior of users around this problem or situation? So these are all meant to probe and how can we get real crisp clarity on the problem before we try to diagnose it. So these questions are linked from here. So as we write things down, maybe there's something where we conduct foundational research to understand our users, to understand who our users are. Our users are. Okay. And then the links here are meant to link to the plan below. So after you've said, okay, in order to answer these questions, these are the actions or milestones I need to take, you'd go down below and you'd create a section and you'd very specifically conduct foundational research to understand who the users are. And then you would say, cool, I know that Kevin is a researcher. And the tasks, I need to reach out to Kevin to see if he has bandwidth or has approval, resource approval. We need to create a research plan, and that research plan might be another milestone that we include up here. So okay, if we're going to include Kevin, we need to have create a research plan. So this helps you start flushing out this greater initiative, and then you can move down. You're gonna obviously just copy the link and come up here and add the right links. So sorry, I'm just gonna edit, apply. So now it actually links down to create a research plan, and then you need to write the steps. Well, what do you need to do to create a research plan? So before I move on, after you've filled out each of these sections, this should, at least on the preliminarily, give an idea of what you're doing. Now, one thing that's important to recognize as well is you may not know exactly what you're going to be doing in the design phase until after you've completed each of these phases. So you could come back at any time and add new links and new initiatives, but this acts as a story on what you're doing and how and what your approach is, and it allows others to collaborate and to see what you did, how you came up with your decisions, and what you need to do next. And then, like I mentioned, so this document would not be the place to document what that foundational research is. You would go down to this section, you'd create a separate doc, and you'd record it there. So this is really meant to be a project brief, not the entire project. This document would get way too overloaded, and this is meant to be a medium for communication. After you create all of the milestones, it's important to come down and actually create all these sections, because at the end of the day, as the designer, it's on you to be able to accurately estimate now what this project will cost you and how long it will take. So once you've created cards for each of the milestones, you can then come in here and add estimates. Maybe this could be t-shirt sizing, small, medium, large, extra large. It could be days, weeks, however your team does it. But let's say this is a medium, which could equate to 2 weeks. Then I could go through each of these and then give my manager an accurate estimate. So one of the great things about using a project brief is it allows you to translate an approach into a plan, and that keeps yourself accountable, and it allows you to basically more accurately report on where you are in the process at any moment. That was something that I struggled with personally as a designer, learning how to work with a double diamond. And then, as you complete these tasks, it's important that you allow yourself the ability to like add links and clearly document things. So if we go to the transitioning user doc that I'm working in now, I'll just show you what I did. So let's get clarity on the problem. So the first thing I did, we had a project kickoff, and that is linked here. I was able to say, let's review legacy and ongoing efforts, links to those documents, and then kind of come up with a rough agenda for the meeting. And then I was able to link my meeting notes below. Everyone's invited, it's complete. And so that's done. And I was able to do this for everything. So for onboarding, I wanted to also define current pain points of confusion for transitioning users. What's the body of this onboarding content need to include? So in order for us to come to that conclusion, we need to first document what are all these pain points. And so we documented those pain points here. I also said, well, what if we need learning content in order to help teach users? Well, instead of just going and creating learning content from scratch, let's go and discover what we already have. So Julie, who is the head of the learning content here, was able to collect a lot of those existing links for content and videos. And so I was able to just paste that directly into here. So this is basically how I documented my approach. And this is how I organized, like creating a plan for each of these initiatives. Because as you can see here, this just like grows and grows and grows. And as new objects come around, like reach out to marketing to see what they've done around new recruiter and jobs. I added this later because I recognized, oh wow, like maybe new transitioning users are getting email content from LinkedIn organization, and we should account for that before we just assume they don't know anything. So I had to go up here, and I added that after I had already started maybe even design explorations, but it's meant to be kind of a living document where we can collaborate around the foundations, approach, and plan of a design sprint. So that, in a nutshell, is the project template. Sorry this video took so long. I'm sure you could figure it out if you just look at the document, but if you wanted a more in-depth explanation, I just wanted this resource to be an option. So good luck and thanks.